Or okay, perfect. Wait for this thing to set up here. Okay. All right. I am ready for you guys. Sorry, I forgot to hit record on YouTube. Okay, so first we're going to go over the news for the first couple for the past couple weeks. It's a lot, but I do have some pictures for you guys. So as we kind of go over it, you guys will be able to actually visually see it. Personal consumption expenditure, which is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, came out a couple weeks ago, and it showed that PCE increased 0.1% month over month, but dipped year over year from 4.3% to 3.8%. Core inflation, which basically strips out the volatile food and energy prices, that dipped from 4.7 to 4.6%, not a huge decrease. This is the number the Fed is actually trying to get to 2%, not the CPI number, which is usually the main number people talk about, as well as us, because it is the one that moves the market a lot. Either way, we've come a long way from the 7% peak we saw last year, which I want you to keep that in mind, because when I go over the charts in a bit, it's going to be important to understand. Besides that, though, if June PCE is the same in July, month over month, or it comes out late July, but for June, month over month, where it only has that 0.1% increase, we can see an even deeper year over year increase or decrease into the twos by the end of this month. And let me pull up pending home sales here so you guys can see them. Share screen. There. Okay, so pending home sales, they fell 2.7% from April to May, and these are signed contracts on existing homes, not new construction. The real reason is because of tight inventory, because on average there are around 3 offers per listing nationally. While on the flip side, there's more new construction homes becoming available. We see that with an increase of 12.2% month over month, and we're at a positive 20% year over year on new home sales, which measures signed contracts on new construction. So existing home sales are basically owner to buyer. New construction sales are specifically builder to buyer. And ever since that NAHB housing index went over 50, like we talked about, remember, anything over 50 is building, anything under 50 is contraction. We see that that rapid building has happened again, and we're seeing the numbers kind of reflect that, because earlier this year we were at, we weren't ever negative on new construction homes, but we were a very, very low percentage. I forgot exactly what it was. 763,000 signed contracts. That median price, 416,300, which we're going to talk about median price, because that's a big thing that's that people are talking about right now. But before we do that, we kind of have to talk about Case-Shiller, right? Home price appreciation. This is really the gold standard. We look at FHFA's home price appreciation, which really only measures appreciation on conforming loans. So anything that's below, in South Florida, anything that's below 727. Essentially for conventional loans, right? Because that's the Federal Housing Finance Agency. That's what they focus on. That measures inflation with conforming loans. Case-Shiller is pretty much the gold standard. It's the one that is behind 2 months, because they take their time to do a good job to measure the market. And we are seeing the first year over year decline since before for a long time. I'm saying before 2020, but probably even before that, because we haven't really seen home price depreciation year over year in a while, right? But it's not too much to worry about, because the month over month home prices increased 0.5% from March to April. Year over year, we are at negative 0.2%. And this is because last year's March to April was a much higher increase month over month, which is why we see that negative number year over year. So for instance, I don't remember the number from last year, March to April, but let's say it was at 1%. Increase month over month, right? Where this, instead of this being 0.5, this was 1%. When you're doing that rolling 12 years, that means that last year's 1% is now being replaced by 0.5. So we're technically speaking negative 0.5% from last year. That's kind of how it works. That's why you're seeing a decrease year over year, but an increase month over month. This is going to happen maybe for 2, 3, 4 months before you start seeing that positive come back again. And it's just because of that increase that we had last year, month over month. Those increases were much much bigger than they are this month. So it's just kind of replacing that number. It doesn't mean that we're actually seeing huge home price decreases. And that 0.2% is nothing really to balk at, to be honest. Miami is actually seeing normal appreciation numbers right now annually, right? 5.2%. We know that the standard is 3 to 5. We're still first place, South Florida, right, in terms of home price appreciation. Shocking, month over month, Cleveland, Ohio at 1.8% appreciation. So it looks like there's a lot of real estate being bought over there. Also really surprising for me to be on top 3 is New York, just because of how expensive it is already over there. So for them to have that 1.3% home price appreciation month over month, that's pretty wild. I also do want to talk about median home prices versus appreciation, because clients, they're going to see median home prices decreasing, because that's what people are talking about. And they're automatically going to think we're seeing a swing in the market, which if you picture it with that negative 0.2% annually home price appreciation in terms of nationally, that kind of comes together like it's almost like a disaster for the clients, right, to kind of talk them out of it. But the thing with median home prices, right, or median, it means just the middle, meaning half the homes sold above that price and the other half sold below that. It's not average. It's not appreciation. It isn't anything like that. It's basically these 5 homes sold for this much. The middle price or the median price was this. That's pretty much it. So for instance, last year, more homes on the market, right? So if we had 5 homes that sold 200, 250, 300, 350, and 400, that median sales price last year would be 300,000, right? Because that's the middle one of those 5 numbers. If all of those homes increased by 6% in terms of appreciation, but now because of affordability and higher rates, and tighter inventory, only those lower priced homes are the ones that sold, right? So that one that was at 200 is now at 212. That one that was at 250 is now at 265. And that one that's at 300 is now at 318. Those 3 sold. What's the median home price there? 265. Does that mean that home prices decreased? No, it just means that now there's less homes being sold, and the ones that are being sold and taken off the market are the lower priced ones, because with higher interest rates, it erodes the buyer's buying power, right? So tough conversation to have with the client, but it's honestly the realistic one, right? It's not, and we're not seeing complete, and especially if we're looking at South Florida, right? South Florida, I believe, has a higher median home price than it did last year, or specifically Miami, and you're seeing that appreciation of 5.2%. But if we're talking about it at a national level, there are pockets essentially in cities that are much higher price appreciation, and those median home sales are going to be lower as well because of that. Rates took a beating these past couple of weeks, and it's really not because of inflation, which is surprising. And this is kind of what I want to talk to you guys about, or something that I want to talk to you guys about. Let me share my screen again. So the ADP employment report, right? And before we jump into this, we've been thinking inflation is going to be coming down around this time. We were right. Inflation is coming down around this time. We thought interest rates are going to come down with it, and they're not. And now it's because there's something else that's holding them up, which didn't really expect, to be honest. And it sucks because you're basically saying that you literally want the system to break, even though, or you're doing things to want to make the system break, but you're saying that you don't want the system to break. So they did take a beating these past couple of weeks, and it's not because of inflation, like I mentioned. It does have to do with specifically jobs right now. Jobs are still doing really, really well, and unemployment claims are actually steady. They actually took a dip the week of June 29, 2 weeks ago. They actually took a dip down of like 20,000 or something like that. So unemployment claims were actually negative, initial claims, and they came back up again this week by about 12,000. But the ADP employment report, which we never really show this or talk about, well, we do kind of skim over it, but this is one of the things that really hurt the market last week. ADP employment report measures employment for the private sector, and it showed that there were 497,000 job creations in May, which was way above the 225,000 that the market anticipated, almost basically more than double. So the market didn't like it, reacted to it, and you saw the 10-year treasury shoot up in a couple days. And you also saw the Fed minutes come out, which basically the Fed minutes is kind of like a report of what they're thinking about, talking about in their next meeting, right? And so they are considering raising another 25 basis points in July and this month, which their meeting, I believe, is not next week, the following. And if they're going to increase another 25 basis points, that's another thing that the market's not going to react well to, right? So kind of a cluster of things, which is crazy because the other employment reports that came out were actually lower than expectations. I forgot which one is the other one that we usually talk about. It's the one that measures the public sector. But that one was actually lower than expectations. But the problem with that employment report was that job wages were increased. So job wages increase. What does that mean? More people, it gives people the option to spend more money, and that's a risk for inflation. So that's another hit that the market took. Just a lot of unnecessary movement, I think, because if the goal is inflation, especially by the Fed, where they're saying that they're going to hike another 25 basis points, even though we see rates or inflation coming down at a rapid pace back from the 7% we were at in September of October of last year, you're basically saying you just want to see unemployment skyrocket, even though you're saying we want to control inflation while keeping jobs safe. It's bullshit at this point. And so they're thinking about increasing another 25 basis points because of these higher job numbers than what they pretty much expected. There's some kind of good news. The market opened up well today. CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, comes out on Wednesday of this week, and this could help alleviate rates a bit as well if we do get favorable data. But to be honest, based on the history we've had for the past year, we are close to the top again on the 10-year. And so I don't think either way, if we don't get favorable data, we should still be okay. Okay. And so very rarely do I go over these charts because it's a lot of analytics and a lot of numbers. But really what I want you guys to pay attention to is, remember that 7% height PCE that I spoke about for last year? That was right around this time, right? October was the highest that we've seen. This is when rates literally touched 8% for like a moment. Everybody freaked out for a week, and then they kind of regressed back down into the 7s and 6s. This is when inflation was the highest, right? And this didn't even end that day. So really what we're looking at is that 4.233 has been the top of what we see the 10-year. And for those of you guys that don't know, the 10-year treasury is basically you lending the US money over 10 years, your return is going to be 4%, right? That's basically what that means. A 4% return is fairly high. Actually, for my elite realtors, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow with how that correlates with your cap rate for your investors and stuff like that, because it's very important to understand what safe money is. This is relatively safe money. And for people to not be investing in the US at a 4% return over 10 years means that they think that that there's something wrong within the US system, which right now is basically everything that's going on with jobs and inflation and things like that, right? And so the height that we've seen, we're already pretty much close to it, which is what I was talking about. There's a chance that we can go a little bit higher into the 8s if we continue to get negative data in terms of jobs and stuff like that. But the fact that we're kind of capped right here at this 4, where we were before back in February, this is February, March. This is also when rates dipped up into the 7s. And we have a lot of room to kind of go down from here. I'm not too worried. I will be on Wednesday when we see that CPI number. But for the most part, I don't really see us moving past this Fibonacci level. And I'm getting a little bit technical here to push up to that 4.2. We've only seen it twice in the past year, which was in October and November, both CPI releases. You can see November 7th, and we can actually look at the data, and you see here October 21st, which is probably a PCE release, okay? So I think we have room to come down, and you'll actually see it on mortgage bond charts as well. And this one will be a little bit quick with it. So here we actually have 2 levels that we have to break through that are very, very tight, which will be difficult because on mortgage bonds, you want to go up. On US Treasuries, you want to go down. So this is going to be a tough break to break through. But if the 10-year continues to go down, it'll be easy for us to retract. But you'll see the lowest that we've been on mortgage-backed securities was October 21st. Same thing with the 10-year, they're literally opposite of each other. And so I don't really see us getting all the way back down here. This was when inflation was at the highest. But if we do touch 97.56, which is this Fibonacci level, that's probably more realistic than getting all the way down here, which means that that'll put rates at about 7.5, or actually no, 7.75-ish, give or take. As of right now, we'll jump into hometown. Oh man, I literally just had it open too. Okay, hold on. Let me put in my password. So we'll jump into Hometown Heroes, and those rates for today on a, that's it. Those rates for today on a, that's the one, on a FHA loans at 7%. And we know, we talk about Hometown Heroes being below market, right? So if Hometown Heroes FHA is at a 7%, that means that market values or market rates are probably at 7.25, 7.3. For Fannie Mae, we're seeing here that they're at 7.25, probably about 7.5, 7.625 already at market. And then their bond pricing is a little bit better for FHA, but it's actually higher. And they just increased this morning. It was at 7.5 when I was looking at it. So they just increased their bond Fannie Freddie to 7.75, and this will probably lower if we continue to see positive basis point changes. But you really only good to use the Florida bond or the Hometown Heroes bond if that person is going to be FHA, USDA, or VA. They're going to be conventional. It's better for them to use the standard Hometown Heroes pricing. But this is where we are. And if this is below market, that means that if a client is not a first-time home buyer, if they're over the income limit, they're going to be getting hit across the head really hard in terms of what pricing looks like, right? And so what I want to show you guys here is the Hometown Heroes 2.0, current funds, available funds, how much has been reserved. I don't think this is one for one because they said that they were only collecting 100 million. And this same thing happened last year when I was looking at this, and they said 500, they said 300. Doesn't make sense. But what I want you to see is the difference from the funds that they got to what's available and what's been reserved. Doesn't mean that 328 million has been reserved, right? Think of it as a percentage, basically. If this is saying 500 million and it's only saying it's 171 million left, that means we're at about what, a little bit less than 20% left in available funds if we're going by this metric. And that's within the first week. Some of these are going to fall through. Some of these that were reserved are going to fall through. I would say probably 20 to 25% of them, because it's probably people that just locked in just to secure those funds without really having a legit, not only contract, but maybe a legit pre-approval, right? And stuff like that. But for the most part, most of these things are going to be purchased today and closed on. And we'll look at that next week to see how much have been purchased within a week or so. But the fact that they said that they had, or that started with 500 and there's only 171, it's about a little bit less than 20% of the funds that are left. We're only about a week in. I don't think that that's going to be the actual number, but like I said, it's more so just for us to have an idea of where the market is in terms of those locks. Me, myself, I locked quite a few Hometown Heroes last week. So I can imagine a lot of people did the same. Airbnb news from a week ago. So this guy, his name is Nick Gurley. He's a YouTuber. I don't know too much about him. You know, for the most part, I do watch MG the Mortgage Guy, and I was very interested to see this other guy that came out that basically debunked this guy's information. So when it comes to this guy, and me just looking at his profile briefly this morning, he has a lot of negative things to say, right? And he does not have really, from what I see, the criteria to do so in terms of accolades and, you know, what he does. It's basically just a YouTuber, and the data is probably there. I don't know. But when we're looking at this specifically, this was easily debunked by somebody who does have the credentials and does have the accolades, right? So he basically came out and said the Airbnbs are collapsing, and you see everybody on Twitter, thank God, man, why the hell am I paying cleaning fees, $200? Man, I hate these owners. They make me take out the trash, all of this stuff, right? And I'm like, damn, you're right. I mean, me personally, the only time I use an Airbnb is if I'm going with a big group. I typically stick to hotels, just because you get, right now it's around the same price point. When Airbnbs first started, they were cheaper. Not anymore with the amount of fees that the owners put on it. And I get it from an owner standpoint. When you have people that don't know how to take care of something in your house, so you have to charge those outrageous fees. But then the normal consumer is the one that kind of gets hit for it. So I could see both sides, but in all truthfulness, it's not really indicative of the declines of Airbnbs and what they're looking at. I mean, we could probably look at the numbers for travel, and they're probably down as well, right? So it's probably just less people traveling as well. There's a lot of different things that come to it. But the point is that these numbers that this guy put are not accurate in terms of the amount or the percentage of drops that these cities are seeing. Top 15 drops, or top 15 cities with the highest drops. These numbers are not 100%. And the problem is that he posted it and it got upwards of 40, 50 million views on Twitter alone, people reposting it and commenting it and expressing that they hate Airbnbs, basically. But for us, we want to actually look at what the data is. So Jamie Lane. So before we jump into this, all right, let's look at Chief Economist, SVP Analytics for AirDNA, tracking performance and explaining trends in short-term rentals, ex-CBRE hotels. Let's look at Nick. CEO of Reventure Consulting, a Reventure app, #1 real estate channel on YouTube with over 4 million monthly views. Okay, great. So this guy's an actual economist, does analytics, tracks performance specifically within short-term rentals, right? Let's go back to the post here. A viral tweet about STR data. Let's get some facts straight. There is not a collapse in revenue per Airbnb listing happening. Is it down in 2023? Yes. Is it down 40%? No. So this is pretty much the data from the chief economist, essentially, where he's showing that the average decrease is -3.6, not -40.3%. You are going to see pockets that are much, much bigger in decreases, like Seaverville, Tennessee at -9.4. You have New Orleans, Louisiana, -14.9. Orlando, Florida, -10.5. There's two that are negative double digits, but there's also a few here that are positive, right? 3.5%. Breckenridge is actually positive. Denver, Colorado is actually positive. Salisbury, Maryland is actually positive. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is actually positive. And so with those positive numbers, really the average decrease is around -3.6%. And this is from somebody who it's their job to do these things. And so when you see, I can guarantee you that this information did not go as far. And you can actually tell here 138.6 thousand views. Let's go back to Nick's. I gotta scroll down because he's full of a bunch of negative shit. 35.1 million. You see how quickly false information will spread. And when you actually put it against real data, not everybody wants to see that, right? And so just wanted to kind of show you guys this because I saw it and I knew from the beginning that a 40% drop was fucking outrageous. Sorry for cursing. Was outrageous. And so I'm glad that this guy came out, and I'm glad that MG actually posted about it so I could read it a little bit further and actually go to this guy's tweets and see what he was about. And so I wanted to show you guys that as well. But we are at 10:30. Do you guys have any questions for me or anything like that?
Hey, Mike, it's Kia. I saw in the chat that Dr. Carla was asking, do you think that the market and how the pace is picking up so quickly, if it's being influenced by Hometown Heroes being open to everyone at this point?
Yeah, and I said that. I said that back when it was announced in March. I told you guys July and the end of this summer was going to be very, very busy. Because people are applying, they want to get down payment assistance. The number one reason why people don't purchase a home is not because of credit or income. It's the number one reason is assets and down payment. And so the fact that it's so accessible, and especially within the Florida market, yeah, people are going to jump onto it. I was telling Kia right now, my team averages maybe, I would say monthly, about 50 loan applications a month. And we're 10 days in and we're at about 30 already for people that want to get approved for Hometown Heroes. And it's really Hometown Heroes specific. There's some that are not, but yes, there's a lot of movement in the market specifically because of Hometown Heroes. which is what's going to help us kind of get through this rocky higher rate summer and gracefully land us into January and February of next year, when the market's a little bit more settled and rates are a little bit lower and people are going to be selling their properties. Because, you know, if you have there was another thing that I saw this weekend on Twitter. You know that 70% of people have an interest rate, or 70% of mortgage borrowers have an interest rate that is lower than 4%. 70% of homeowners are sitting pretty at less than 4% interest rate right now. So that's another reason why we're not seeing listings on the market, right? Because it doesn't make sense. If rates dip into the 5s, then you're like, yeah, I'm at a 4. I'm at 4.25. I'll take a 5.875 and I'll buy a bigger house, right? If you're at 4.25 and you see 7, almost double, you're like, hell no, right? So we need rates to come down. When rates come down, we're going to see more listings. And it's going to make everybody's life a little bit easier in terms of the market and maybe stabilize it a little bit. But yes, Hometown Heroes is really influencing the multiple offer situations that we're seeing. And you guys are going to have to get aggressive. And this is kind of what I was afraid of, right? It's because now everybody got Hometown Heroes money to play with, and they also have their own money saved. So if they wanted to, they could say, hey, I'm going to put $10,000 over appraised value, 15 over appraised value, right? And those people are going to be the ones that they get hurt, because it's going to take them much longer to refinance. They're going to help everybody else that has bought within the last year or so that has also used Hometown Heroes, because that appreciation for them is going to increase. And now, because of their equity increases on their market, because the appraisal, because of everybody that's coming into the market now with Hometown Heroes, those people who thought it was going to take 2-3 years, maybe it only takes 1.5 years to refinance, because they'll have enough equity to do so. So the new people will be helping out the prior people that took in a basically 101% financing before, because that appreciation is going to increase for them, but they're going to be hurting themselves in the long run, because as appreciation goes back and slows down, they're going to be stuck with those higher rates for a longer time. The bank should do a rate portability like they do for taxes. I mean, there are ways, right? There's these things they call assumable mortgages, and a lot of VA and FHA loans are assumable, where you basically can take over that seller's payment, but which is, in theory, something that's very, very nice. But what they don't tell you is that if that person still wants, let's say they owe $200,000 and they want $300,000, you're going to take that mortgage, or that VA mortgage, or whatever it is, and maybe you could do a HELOC, maybe you can't because of your credit or whatever the case is, or let's say FHA, maybe you can't do a HELOC because HELOCs require higher credit, right? So now you have to find a way to do $100,000, put down $100,000. It's not something that's very realistic. You'll maybe find 1 out of 100 people that will actually be able to assume a mortgage for that reason, because you still have to come in with a difference for the seller. And sometimes you can't do it taking out a second loan. But yeah, there is technically rate portability. You guys have any other questions for me? No? All righty. It's 10:34. We'll be back next weekend. Or not next weekend. Next week on Monday. Talk about CPI and any other major news that comes out this week. We'll kind of go over it. Any topics that you guys want me to talk about, I'm always open to you guys emailing me ahead of time, and then I can put it into our Monday Mortgage Minutes as well. So that'd be pretty cool. So let me know if anything. Have a great week. If you guys need us, we're here. And see you next Monday.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem.